Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through the narrow, cobbled streets of ancient Rome. And the first thing you notice is the smoke-sweet curls of frankincense and myrrh rising into the air before the day has even properly started. The city smells like someone lit 1,000 scented candles at once, and all of it is for you. Why? Because today, in this bustling empire, it happens to be your birthday. That's right, you've been handed sandals. A toga that definitely doesn't fit quite right, and now you're expected to celebrate in full Roman style. You probably won't survive this without at least one awkward toast or a little too much cheap wine, but that's part of the charm, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you'd notice, waking up in Rome on your birthday, is that the day is set apart from all others. Unlike in our modern calendar, where a birthday feels like a personal milestone, here it's as much about your household gods as about you. You rise with sunlight filtering through wooden shutters, and the air is already humming with the quiet shuffle of servants laying out garlands of flowers. The smell of laurel, violets, and rose petals mingles with the sharp tang of incense, while the family's lararium, a small shrine to the household spirits, has been cleaned and decorated with fresh greenery. You're expected to step forward and make an offering. A bowl of salt and flour sits ready, along with a tiny bronze ladle. You sprinkle a pinch into the flickering flame, whispering a prayer for good health or maybe just for decent wine tonight. Historians still argue whether birthday offerings at the household shrine were a universal practice or more of an upper-class quirk, but here, in the glow of this private ceremony, it feels natural. The fire hisses softly as you pour a few drops of oil, and in that moment, you're reminded that this day isn't only about your birth, it's about survival, fortune, and keeping unseen powers on your side. Roman birthdays carried weight. One mainstream fact: emperors had theirs turned into near-national holidays, with temples ringing bells. Sacrifices performed on a grand scale, and poets forced to churn out flattering verses. If you were Augustus, your birthday might even reset the calendar for public celebrations. But even ordinary citizens, like artisans or merchants, marked the day, though less extravagantly, with prayer, food, and a few small luxuries. It wasn't so much about tallying years as it was about acknowledging your place in a world where life expectancy could be depressingly short. If you made it another cycle around the sun, that alone was worth garlands and cake. But here's a quirky tidbit. Originally, Roman women's birthdays weren't celebrated with the same pomp as men's. In the early Republic, women's special days were more tied to marriage or household events than to their actual birthdays. Over time, though, this shifted. By the imperial period, wealthy women received gifts, poems, and parties too. Imagine being the unlucky poet tasked with complimenting your cousin's new hairstyle in 30 lines of Latin hexameter. Awkward applause guaranteed. The morning moves in a gentle rhythm. You sit in the courtyard, watching relatives drift in, one by one. A cousin arrives with a small clay figurine he shaped himself lopsided, yes, but made with care. Another relative hands you a jug of wine sealed with wax, and then there's your uncle, who insists on reciting poetry he just dashed off this morning. You clap politely, though a part of you wishes he'd stuck to bringing olives. Throughout the morning, the household shrine remains the focus. Servants bring fresh incense, family members pour libations of milk or wine, and prayers echo softly across the courtyard. The line between sacred duty and party prep blurs completely. One moment you're making an offering to Jupiter for protection. The next, you're eyeing the honey cake cooling on a nearby table. You can almost smell the sticky sweetness from where you sit. And honestly, the gods will have to forgive you for being a little distracted. Birthdays in Rome weren't just personal, they were communal. The celebration included children, adults, and even slaves, though always in a hierarchy. Servants might share in the feast, but the spotlight belonged to the household's head or the honored guest. Still, the fact that everyone gathered mattered. Historians still debate whether the poorest Romans could afford to celebrate at all. Some scholars argue that birthdays for laborers or slaves slipped by unnoticed, swallowed up by survival and toil. Others believe even the humblest families found small ways to mark the day: loaf of bread shared, a candle lit, a whispered prayer at dawn. It's one of those little mysteries where the evidence doesn't quite tell us everything. As the day stretches on, the atmosphere changes. The sun climbs higher, heating the terracotta roofs until they shimmer. Street vendors outside shout about olives, dates, or cheap wine, their cries drifting into your courtyard. But today, you don't have to haggle or count coins. Today, the world pauses for you. Even if it's only for a morning, you're allowed to feel important. It's strange how familiar parts of this feel. The teasing jokes about your age, the cousins sneaking bites of cake before lunch, the ceremonial speech by your uncle. None of this feels that far from a modern birthday. But the context is different. Here, your day begins not with balloons or phone notifications, but with fire, garlands, and the presence of invisible spirits. It's not just you being honored, it's your connection to family, gods, and the fragile thread of life itself. And that awareness lingers as you sit back in your chair, listening to laughter bounce off marble walls. The gods have been honored, the family is gathered, and the wine is ready to flow. You glance again at the honey cake, already garnished with nuts and dripping with syrup, and realize that the best part of the day is still to come. The rituals may have claimed the morning, but soon the feast will take over. The incense is still curling lazily upward, but your stomach is starting to grumble. And even the household spirits would probably forgive you for being a little impatient. The incense from the morning rituals still lingers faintly as you drift toward the dining area, where the real centerpiece of any Roman birthday is about to unfold: the feast. The kitchen is alive with the kind of chaos that would make even the toughest modern restaurant look tame. Knives scrape against wooden boards, bronze pans clang, servants argue over seasoning. And from somewhere in the back, the unmistakable hiss of boiling pots sends clouds of steam curling upward. The smells hit you before you even see the food. Freshly baked bread fills the space with its nutty aroma. The loaves stacked in baskets, crusts golden brown and crackling slightly from the oven's heat. Jugs of wine wait to be poured, cheaper stuff for distant relatives and servants, while richer Falernian, carefully sealed, is reserved for the household itself. Olives glisten in bowls of oil, some still flecked with the dust of the field. Tucked in pride of place, like a crown jewel, sits the honey cake. Its top is glazed until it gleams under the flickering light, a promise of sweetness that everyone in the room has already eyed. Before dessert can be considered, the Romans follow a careful ritual for meals. First comes the gastaccio, a parade of appetizers meant to awaken the palate. Pure-handed boiled eggs sprinkled with herbs, tiny bites of cheese, and pickled vegetables whose sharp temps makes your mouth water. Sausages arrive next, sizzling fat dripping onto coals, filling the courtyard with a smoky, mouth-watering aroma. You bite too quickly, nearly burn your tongue, and swallow with a grin. This is your day. Indulgence, mandatory. A mainstream historical fact. Cakes were indeed central to Roman birthdays, though they weren't the frosted towers we imagine today. Dense discs of flour, honey, and cheese, sometimes topped with nuts or dried fruit, were baked with pride. The candle tradition is less clear. Historians still argue whether Romans lit candles on cakes as offerings to the household gods, or if that idea was borrowed later from Greek or Germanic customs. Either way, fire and sweetness were essential. You sneak a glance at the honey cake, already imagining the first sticky bite. As the meal progresses, the room swells with sound. Older men argue politics, quoting Cicero as casually as we might mention the weather. Women lean together, whispering about which neighbor watered down his wine or who purchased suspiciously cheap jewelry at the Forum. Children dart between tables, snatching olives and leaving trails of crumbs. In the middle of it all, you are toasted again and again, your name rolling across the courtyard. Cups of wine clink in tribute, some spilling in exuberance, others leaving damp rings on marble floors. You sip carefully, but can't resist a second or third helping. Here's a quirky tidbit. Guests often receive small tokens to take home: nuts wrapped in leaves, figs tucked in scraps of cloth. Think of it as the ancient version of party favors, sticky and sweet. Your cousin pockets a date, claiming it's for later, then sneaks it behind his tunic when no one is looking. Generosity and playfulness, wrapped into one edible package, remind everyone that feasting isn't just about eating, it's about sharing abundance. Eating in Rome is as much performance as it is nourishment. Wealthier households recline on couches, propped on elbows, while servants circulate constantly, replenishing plates and refilling cups. For poorer citizens, seating in fare would be simpler benches instead of couches. Bread instead of sausage, but the intention remains. Mark the day with food, community, and recognition of survival. Historians still debate how accessible birthday feasts were for lower classes. Some argue laborers marked birthdays with nothing more than bread, olives, and perhaps a candle at the household shrine. Others believe even modest families scraped together small luxuries, maybe a dish of lentils or a slice of honeyed bread, to honor the day. The wine flows freely, loosening tongues and encouraging jokes. Someone teases you about your age, claiming you marched with Caesar, though your knees feel far too delicate. Another raises a cup so enthusiastically that half his drink ends up on the floor, and the room erupts with laughter. Romans seem to require at least 3 well-timed jokes at a feast, and your family is determined to meet the quota. You laugh along, trying not to snort wine through your nose, and realize that humor was as essential to the meal as bread or honey. At last, the honey cake is brought forward. Not massive, but symbolic, its glaze still shimmering. First, a piece is offered to the household gods at the Lararium. Crumbs and honey dropped onto the altar beside the incense. Only then is it divided and served. The cake is dense yet soft, dripping with honey, and the nuts add a welcome crunch. You bite in, letting the sticky sweetness coat your tongue, and for a moment, politics, gossip, and expectations fall away. The feast begins to mellow, but the air remains alive with energy. Lamps flicker as evening settles, casting shadows on the walls and highlighting the curls of smoke rising from incense and candle flames. Children curl on cushions, half asleep but still sneaking crumbs. The older relatives continue to toast and argue, now in softer, more reflective tones. The courtyard seems suspended between ritual and leisure, the smells of wine, roasting meat, and honey mingling into a scent you'll carry with you in memory. Another mainstream fact: Roman feasts often ended with fruit, nuts, and honeyed pastries, sometimes paired with dessert, wine, or mulled-spiced drinks. These final touches weren't just indulgent. They reinforced social bonds and symbolized abundance and prosperity, connecting the household to agricultural cycles. You notice how this mirrors the morning's offerings, starting with prayers and incense, ending with shared enjoyment, a full-circle celebration that honored both gods and humans. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some Romans believed spilling wine was lucky, a tiny blessing signaling that the gods appreciated generosity and laughter. That cousin spilling half his cup. Technically, he was performing an auspicious act. Only in Rome could accidents become charms, and only on your birthday could spilling wine be celebrated rather than scolded. The more you sit, the more you notice subtle layers. A servant tiptoes with a platter of figs, their skin sticky with honey, and a distant cousin hums a tuneless song about family fortune. The wine's heady aroma mixes with the tang of roasted meat, the spice of pepper from distant lands, and the soft perfume of garlands that now droop slightly under the day's weight. Every sense is engaged: taste, smell, sound, sight, and even touch, as the warm breeze carries the courtyard's scents over your skin. Historians still debate how closely commoners experienced such sensory richness. Elite villas overflowed with extravagance, imported spices, and rare fruits, while smaller homes relied on local ingredients and simpler rituals. Yet even in modest households, the day was suffused with meaning, whether through a simple loaf of bread or a handful of olives. By the time the honey cake tray is nearly empty, the courtyard has quieted somewhat, though the ambience remains vivid. You lean back, sticky fingers and full stomach, and realize that Roman birthdays were never simply personal milestones. They were rituals of connection, family, household spirits, and divine favor, all interwoven. Even the smallest gesture, a spilled drop of wine or a stolen fig, contributed to the rhythm of celebration. And as the lamps burn lower, the courtyard settles into a warm, golden glow. Laughter and conversation ebb and flow like gentle waves. The memory of flavors, the hum of voices, the subtle smoke curling upward, all coalesce into a rich sensory tapestry. You realize that in Rome, birthdays were less about the individual and more about the weaving together of life, survival, and community into a single day of indulgence and gratitude. By the end of it, you feel full, not just in belly, but in spirit. Breadcrumbs and honey may be gone, but the warmth of connection lingers. Tomorrow, the bread will harden, the wine amphory will stand empty, and the cake will exist only in memory. But tonight, under garland's soft lamplight, and the gentle watch of household spirits, you feel abundant, seen, and, somehow, eternal. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers, and though the warmth of the feast still lingers pleasantly in your stomach, the day's rituals are far from over. In Rome, a birthday isn't simply about eating until you're full. It's about honoring the invisible threads that tie your life to family, community, and the divine. You clutch a small bowl of wine in your hand and drift back toward the household shrine, the Lararium, where the real guardians of your home await. The shrine is modest, just a small alcove in the corner of the courtyard, barely catching your eye if you weren't expecting it. But inside, little figurines stand in careful alignment. A pair of Lares, guardian spirits of the household, wear short tunics and raise tiny arms as if to greet you. Beside them, the Penates, protectors of your food and pantry, watch silently. In your imagination, they've been observing your life for years, counting your steps, watching over every meal, every fire, every guest crossing the threshold. You bow your head, the wine shaking slightly in your hand. To an outsider, this might seem overly serious, almost theatrical, but in a Roman household, these figures are vital. Mainstream historical fact. Romans routinely honored the Lares and Penates at meals, particularly during birthdays, with offerings of bread, fruit, or wine. Such gestures weren't mere superstition, they were believed to secure the household's well-being. Ignoring the household spirits could mean spoiled grain, sick children, or accidents that seemed inexplicable. You pour a little wine into the small dish on the altar, the liquid hissing softly as it hits the warm clay. A servant adds incense, the smoke spiraling upward, curling and twisting into the shadows. You offer a morsel of honey cake, your fingers sticky from the feast just ended, and whisper your hopes for the year ahead. Health for your family, prosperity in trade, perhaps fewer long-winded speeches from your uncle. Here as a quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed in a personal genius for Minor Juno for women, invisible guardian tied directly to their life force. Birthdays were the moment to honor this personal spirit, feeding it with sacrifices and prayers so it wouldn't falter over the year ahead. Imagine blowing out candles, not just for a wish, but to recharge the very essence of yourself, an invisible twin whose happiness ensured your own survival. The rituals are precise. Oil drips onto the flame, filling the air with a sharp sizzle. Laurel leaves crackle as they burn, and the household head mutters prayers under his breath, calling on Jupiter for strength, Juno for protection, and perhaps Fortuna if luck has been elusive. There's a delicate balance here between religion and superstition. One moment you're solemnly performing rituals. The next, you're glancing over your shoulder, half expecting the figurines to wink. Historians still argue whether these rituals were performed uniformly across Roman households. Elite villas boasted lavish shrines, painted alcoves, and gold-trimmed statues. Modest homes might have only a clay shelf and rudimentary figurines. Some scholars suggest that the worship of the genius was primarily elite, while others argue the practice trickled down to almost every household. Standing here, none of that seems to matter. Whether marble or clay, the intention is the same. Acknowledge the unseen. Ask for protection, and give thanks for life itself. Children cluster near the shrine, sticky fingers and wide eyes reflecting the flickering lamplight. To them, the Lares seem almost alive. One whispers that the figurines move at night, creeping into the kitchen to inspect the bread and count amphorae. Another insists they once heard the spirits laugh when their father tripped over a stool. You smile softly at their vivid imaginations, though a tiny part of you wonders if the children aren't entirely wrong. Rome is a city where gods can lurk in every shadow, from the grand forum temples to the smallest household altar. Once the prayers are complete, the household relaxes, though the shrine is never left empty. A servant refills the tiny lamps so the Lares continue to glow softly, the smoke rising lazily from incense and oil. The courtyard is bathed in the warm, amber light, and you can almost feel invisible eyes watching, approving the day's proper reverence. It strikes you how much of Roman life is a careful balancing act, celebration intertwined with ritual, pleasure paired with respect. You feast, yes, but you also honor the gods. You laugh with cousins, but you bow to figurines. Even on your birthday, which is ostensibly your day, the event becomes communal, a shared acknowledgement of mortality, prosperity, and continuity. The servants begin clearing some plates, though conversation continues in gentle waves. You notice little details. The subtle aroma of oil lamps mixing with the lingering scent of honey. And roasted meat, the soft scuffle of children finding new mischief, the warm breeze carrying faint sounds from the streets beyond. Every detail feels heightened because today isn't just ordinary. It is your day, yet also a day for the unseen, the gods, and the household's harmony. A quirky tidbit: some Romans believed household spirits could be tricked if ignored, and they sometimes left small offerings in secret corners to avoid offending them. This might explain why you find a single fig or a coin tucked behind the altar, placed there without ceremony, just to keep the spirits smiling. Historians still debate whether birthdays and shrine rituals were equally observed across social classes. Elite families might host feasts lasting hours, accompanied by poets and musicians, while laborers' birthdays were quieter, marked with bread, simple wine, and a whispered prayer. Yet even modest households honored the household gods in their own way, reflecting the universality of divine acknowledgement in Roman life. By now, a comfortable hush settles over the courtyard. Children drift into sleep, leaning on cushions, their sticky fingers and sweet-smelling hair evidence of earlier mischief. Adults sip slowly, some nodding off in the warmth of wine, others quietly reflecting on the day. The household shrine stands as a constant presence. The glow from the lamps and flicker of incense smoke a soft reminder that the gods are still attentive, still watching. You lean back, sticky fingers and full stomach, reminding you that this day has been more than a feast. It has been a delicate weaving of the human and divine. You realize that Roman birthdays were never just personal milestones. They were threads binding family, spirits, and gods into a shared tapestry. Even the smallest gesture, a spilled drop of wine, a stolen fig, a whispered prayer, becomes part of the day's rhythm. As night deepens, the courtyard is bathed in soft lamplight, the air redolent with incense and wine, and the subtle hum of conversation fades to quiet contentment. You feel that today, in honoring both gods and humans, you have fulfilled your role as celebrant, witness, and participant. Your personal milestone has expanded beyond yourself, touching the household spirits, your family, and the invisible threads that hold Roman life together. By the time you finally stretch on a cushion, the fire low and embers glowing, you realize birthdays in Rome were less about you alone and more about continuity, protection, and shared celebration. Tomorrow, the bread will harden, wine amphorae will be emptied, and the honey cake will exist only in memory. But tonight, in the glow of lamps, the curl of incense smoke, and the soft, warm breathing of your family, you feel abundant, seen, and quietly immortal in a way only the ancients understood. Even after the cake crumbs are swept away and the last sip of wine settles in your stomach, the day's festivities in a Roman household continue to ripple outward. Birthdays, unlike the rushed celebrations we know today, often stretched across hours, sometimes even blending into the next day. You trudge toward the courtyard again, where the open space has been transformed into an arena of music, games, and ritualized performances. Torches flicker along the walls, casting shadows that dance as if they too are participating in the celebration. Children, now wiped clean of honey and crumbs, dart around the courtyard, chasing one another or practicing acrobatics learned from older siblings. Laughter mingles with the faint strains of a lyre somewhere off to the side, where a servant or a young cousin plucks gentle melodies meant to accompany the evening. The air smells of oil lamps, smoke from the hearth, and a subtle sweetness from lingering incense. You realize that even as the feast winds down, Roman birthdays maintain a lively, bucolic, almost theatrical energy, where sensory engagement is as essential as the food that fueled it. A mainstream historical fact. Music and games were central to Roman celebrations, not just birthdays, but festivals and household milestones alike. Children often performed simple plays or recited verses, while adults played board games, dice, or strategic games like latrun couli, a kind of Roman chess. These activities weren't simply entertainment, they reinforced family bonds, taught strategy, and maintained the rhythm of daily life. You watch as a group of younger children attempts a race around the courtyard, tripping over cushions and each other in their enthusiasm. One cousin tumbles dramatically, earning both laughter and a hand to help him up. The mood is light, playful, and slightly chaotic, exactly the balance the Romans prized. Historians still argue whether these games were more ritualized than recreational, or if they simply evolved into entertainment over time. Either way, today, in your courtyard, the distinction hardly matters. A quirky tidbit. Some Roman households incorporated more eccentric contests, like tossing small balls filled with seeds or competing to balance wooden figures atop pillars, supposedly to appease certain spirits or gods. Winners were often awarded simple prizes, sometimes nuts, coins, or even the honor of serving wine to elders, a mark of temporary prestige that mattered surprisingly much in the family hierarchy. Watching a younger cousin carefully try to balance a clay figurine, you can't help but laugh. The seriousness with which he approaches the game is both charming and oddly intense. Around the courtyard, adults are engaged in subtler forms of performance. Some lean against walls or sit on benches, quietly observing, commenting on technique or strategy. Others, encouraged by wine, engage in gentle competitions, mock debates about philosophy, playful mimicry of politicians or poets, or rhetorical exercises recalling passages from Cicero. You notice that laughter and intellectual display often go hand in hand. A subtle reminder that Roman education and entertainment were intertwined. Even on a birthday, you can feel the expectation to show wit and presence of mind. Though luckily, failure usually elicits teasing rather than scolding. Music continues, now joined by soft percussion from a small drum or clattering of bronze vessels, creating a rhythm that seems to infuse the courtyard itself. You join in with a small tambourine, hands sticky with lingering honey from earlier cake, and notice how rhythm and motion help tie everyone together. The repetition of sound, the pulse of movement, creates a shared energy that both excites and soothes. For Romans, this was more than enjoyment. was a subtle ritual, an acknowledgement of harmony in the household. A mainstream historical fact. Some birthday celebrations included small theatrical performances or recitations, sometimes improvised, sometimes pre-learned. These performances weren't professional, but they were essential for social cohesion, teaching decorum, and reinforcing family roles. Scholars still debate the extent to which these performances were scripted or spontaneous, though evidence from frescoes and household inscriptions suggests a wide variety of approaches. Today, as you watch a cousin dramatically recite a short poem about household fortunes, it's easy to imagine how seriously these displays were sometimes taken. Quirky tidbit number 2. Romans occasionally invited neighboring families or friends to participate in these performances, not merely as spectators, but as co-actors. This created a communal atmosphere where households intertwined temporarily, blurring lines between private and public life. You notice that one neighbor has joined a game, nudging your older cousin with playful mischief. The mixture of familial intimacy and neighborly competition produces a lively, almost chaotic harmony, exactly what the Romans loved. The games, laughter, and music gradually become intertwined with the evening's ritual prayers. You find yourself drawn back to the Lararium, carrying a small bowl of wine to top off the offerings to the Lares and Penates. Even amidst revelry, Romans never completely abandon reverence. The household spirits are quiet observers, their figurines catching flickers of torchlight as if nodding in approval at the day's carefully orchestrated chaos. Historians still argue whether these extended birthday activities were typical for all Romans or mostly reserved for wealthier households who could afford leisure and space. Evidence suggests that while the elite indulged in elaborate multi-hour celebrations with music, games, and theatrical display, modest families adapted similar customs to simpler, shorter formats board games, small races, or storytelling. Even so, the intention remained the same: to create joy, mark time, and bind family together in both play and ritual. As the evening deepens, your senses continue to absorb the atmosphere. The smell of burning oil lamps mixes with the faint scent of roasted meat lingering from earlier. The sound of soft laughter intertwines with music, and the occasional clatter of a dropped game piece punctuates the rhythm. Even the cool night air feels part of the performance, brushing against your skin and carrying the faint, distant sounds of the city beyond. You realize that Roman birthdays were immersive experiences designed to engage every sense, every thought, every moment of presence. You notice small acts of camaraderie: an elder quietly passing a roasted fig to a child, a cousin offering their seat on a bench to another, a neighbor teasing you lightly about your attempts at a game. Each of these gestures, small and human, reinforces the communal rhythm of the day. In this way, celebration becomes a lesson in connection, subtly teaching values of sharing, observation, and attention to others. Finally, the games wind down. Children collapse on cushions or benches, laughter now quieter, bodies sticky with remnants of honey and roasted meat. Adults stretch lazily, the energy of wine and conversation settling into a gentle hum. Music softens to occasional strums, and the courtyard feels simultaneously alive and serene. You sit back, reflecting on the day. Feasting, ritual, games, music, and communal laughter all intricately woven into a seamless experience. Evening concludes not with abruptness, but a gentle tapering. Torches burn lower, shadows stretch long, and the household shrine glows softly in its corner. You realize that Roman birthdays were not merely personal milestones. They were elaborate, layered experiences combining feasting, play, ritual, and performance to reinforce family cohesion, divine acknowledgement, and the simple joys of presence. As you stretch and adjust on a cushion, sticky fingers now cleaned, you sense a quiet satisfaction. The courtyard, with its lamps, music, laughter, and lingering scents, is a microcosm of Roman life itself, communal, performative, respectful of the gods, and yet intimately human. These birthdays, far from simple, were exercises in continuity, connection, and celebration, leaving you full, not just in body, but in spirit. By now, the evening has deepened, and the courtyard settles into a soft amber glow, the flickering torches casting dancing shadows on the walls. You lean back against a cushion, still savoring the aftertaste of honey and wine, and notice that the celebrations have shifted. No longer a riot of noise, games, and clattering plates, the birthday now enters a quieter, more reflective phase. It is the time for storytelling, for remembering ancestors, and for connecting the past with the present Roman style. Elders gather on low benches near the hearth, their tunics slightly wrinkled, hands gesturing as they recount tales. One begins to describe a birthday from decades ago, where a visiting magistrate performed an impromptu ritual, or a family member narrowly avoided a small disaster with quick wit. You listen, rapt, noticing how the details mix memory, exaggeration, and moral lesson. Romans loved storytelling for its instructional power as much as its entertainment value. Birthdays provided the perfect setting, a captive audience, and an attentive mind. A mainstream historical fact: storytelling was a crucial component of Roman domestic life. Oral histories reinforced family prestige, social norms, and civic virtue. In birthday settings, elders often recounted heroic deeds, clever solutions, or humorous incidents to entertain, instruct, and maintain a sense of continuity. Historians still argue about how strictly these tales reflected actual events versus stylized embellishment. Either way, the stories shaped household identity and taught children their place in a complex social web. Children curl at your feet, eyes wide, hanging on every word. They giggle at exaggerations like when an uncle supposedly leaped across the courtyard to save a falling amphora, but even their laughter is a form of participation, a subtle acknowledgement that the household's shared history belongs to them as much as the adults. You glance at their sticky fingers, now wiped clean, and realize that every small act of attention and participation, from spilling wine to balancing clay figurines, contributes to this intricate social choreography. A quirky tidbit: some Roman storytellers would exaggerate supernatural involvement, claiming household spirits or personal genius intervened at critical moments. One tale involves a mischievous Lar tipping over a chair to prevent a quarrel, prompting laughter and nervous glances at the household shrine. Such stories blurred the line between divine presence and human action, keeping listeners alert, respectful, and entertained. Meanwhile, small performances continue around the edges of the courtyard. Young adults recite poetry or short plays, occasionally improvising humorous exchanges that poke fun at relatives or poke subtle critiques at city officials. You are reminded that Roman birthdays were as much about social literacy and display as they were about indulgence. Quick wit, careful observation, and respectful humor were highly valued. Even you, sitting sticky-handed from honey cake, feel an unspoken pressure to participate, smile at jokes, and nod at the right moments. Music remains a quiet undercurrent, the soft pluck of a lyre, the occasional tap of a drum or rattle, harmonizing with laughter and murmured conversations. The blend of soundstring, percussion, and human voices creates a rhythm that soothes yet energizes. You realize that Romans were acutely aware of atmosphere. Birthdays weren't just about feasting or gifts, but the orchestration of light, sound, smell, and movement to create a holistic sensory experience. Historians still debate the extent to which birthday rituals were uniform across social classes. Elite households could afford professional musicians, elaborate performances, and exotic foods, whereas modest families relied on simpler instruments, homegrown snacks, and improvised games or stories. Yet, in both settings, the core elements, ritual, entertainment, acknowledgement of family, and spirits, remains strikingly similar. Today, as you watch a neighbor quietly recite a humorous verse about a runaway amphora, the disparity of wealth seems less relevant. The shared rhythm of celebration matters most. A mainstream fact: family memory, and oral history often intersected with the ritual aspect of birthdays. The recounting of past events served to reaffirm social bonds, transmit cultural knowledge, and honor both living and deceased relatives. On birthdays, stories of past ancestors reinforced household prestige and reminded the younger generation of their inherited responsibilities. You notice the subtle nods of approval from adults whenever a younger family member demonstrates understanding or cleverness, evidence that storytelling was never just entertainment. It was a form of social education. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some Romans believed that humorous stories or playful exaggerations could temporarily appease household spirits or distract malevolent forces, ensuring continued protection throughout the year. A single well-told joke might be considered as spiritually beneficial as a small offering of bread or wine. You watch one cousin retell an old tale of spilled wine and a startled Lar, earning delighted laughter from children and a knowing smirk from the elders. The blending of instruction, amusement, and subtle ritual is seamless. The evening deepens further, shadows lengthening and torches burning low. Conversation grows quieter, voices rich with nostalgia, soft laughter punctuating pauses in the storytelling. Children's eyelids droop, some nodding off mid-story, leaning against cushions or older relatives. The household moves in unison, an unspoken choreography of relaxation, reflection, and preparation for the night. You sit back, feeling the ambient warmth, the heat of earlier fires, the lingering smell of roasted meat, the faint tang of honey and wine, the gentle rhythm of voices and instruments. All senses are engaged, and all are aware of being part of a shared experience. Historians still debate whether birthdays included formalized rituals of memory for deceased family members, or if acknowledgement of ancestors was woven informally into storytelling. Evidence suggests a mix. Elite families often held dedicated commemorations, while more modest households integrated ancestral remembrance into casual narrative and performance. Either approach reinforces the essential Roman understanding. Birthdays are not merely personal milestones, but anchors of continuity, community, and connection across generations. Finally, the night winds toward a tranquil cadence. Torches burn lower, the scent of incense and roasted food fades, and you feel the soft chill of night air brushing against your skin. Adults recline lazily, children curl into makeshift beds, and the household shrine glows faintly in its corner. The Lares and Penates remain vigilant, small figurines catching flickers of torchlight as if approving the day's celebrations. You realize that birthdays in Rome are a weaving of joy, ritual, education, and reflection, all layered atop one another to form a seamless, living experience. You stretch, finally feeling both physically and spiritually sated. The feast, games, storytelling, music, and prayer have flowed together, each element reinforcing the other, creating a rhythm that is uniquely Roman. Tonight, under garlands flickering lamplight, and the protective gaze of household spirits, you feel the full weight of tradition, family, and the unseen. Birthdays are not just about marking the passing of years, they are exercises in continuity, connection, and celebration, leaving you full not only in body but in mind and soul. The night has deepened further, and the courtyard, once a riot of laughter, clinking cups, and playful chaos, has transformed into a quieter, contemplative space. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers, casting a soft, flickering glow across walls decorated with garlands that now sag slightly under the weight of the day's celebrations. You stretch on a cushion, noticing the lingering sense of roasted meat, honey, and wine, a subtle reminder of the feast's indulgence. Though your stomach is comfortably full, your mind remains alert, attuned to the rhythm of post-feast activities that the Romans prized so highly. Even as the immediate energy of games and performances fades, birthday rituals in Rome continue to unfold in layered, almost imperceptible ways. Small, deliberate acts of devotion take center stage. You watch a cousin approach the lararium with a tiny bowl of wine, Careful not to spill, and place it on the altar. The smoke of incense curls upward, wrapping around the figurines of the Lares and Penates. And for a moment, the courtyard seems suspended between the mortal and divine. Mainstream historical fact. Romans routinely honored household spirits during birthdays with offerings, prayers, and small sacrifices to ensure health, prosperity, and protection. Historians still debate whether this veneration was uniform across social classes or varied significantly with wealth, but the intention to acknowledge and reinforce unseen guardians was ubiquitous. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that the timing of offerings mattered, with certain hours of the day being more auspicious for presenting gifts to household spirits. A wine offering at dusk, for example, was considered especially effective for securing favor over the coming year. You notice a servant gently rearranging a few candles around the altar, a seemingly minor act imbued with ritual significance, emphasizing how even the smallest gestures were meaningful in the Roman worldview. While these quiet rituals unfold, soft music continues in the background, a lyre, accompanied by the delicate rattle of a tambourine, setting a soothing rhythm that threads through conversation and laughter. Adults engage in reflective discussion, debating everything from the morality of civic officials to the cleverness of a cousin's earlier performance. While children, now quieter, observe and absorb. The interplay of sound, scent, and movement forms an immersive experience that blends leisure, devotion, and social cohesion seamlessly. You notice the subtle choreography of attention. Eyes meet in acknowledgement, hands reach out to offer a gesture of kindness, and soft laughter punctuates thoughtful pauses. Romans understood birthdays as more than personal milestones. They were structured exercises in social literacy. Through storytelling, performance, and ritual, participants learn the nuances of hierarchy, communal responsibility, and the importance of honoring both living and divine presences. Historians still argue about the degree to which these practices were codified or improvised, but the evidence suggests a flexible yet consistent pattern of social engagement across households. The evening continues its gentle flow, and you are drawn once more to the storytelling corner. An elder recounts a tale of a long-ago harvest festival, weaving in the household's own experiences and small moral lessons. Children, clutching cushions and still sticky with traces of cake, giggle at hyperbolic moments, such as a runaway goat or a mischievous servant. A subtle lesson is embedded within every story. Attentiveness, respect, and cleverness are valued traits, reinforced not through lecture, but through immersion in narrative and performance. A quirky tidbit. Sometimes storytellers would exaggerate supernatural involvement, claiming that household spirits had directly influenced outcomes. A particularly exaggerated tale involves a lar tipping over a jug of wine to prevent a quarrel, eliciting both laughter and awe. In this way, humor and instruction coexist, weaving entertainment, reverence, and social guidance into a single activity. Meanwhile, smaller household rituals continue in tandem. Servants quietly replenish oil lamps, ensuring that the lares remain illuminated, while a soft breeze carries the mingled scents of incense and lingering honey across the courtyard. You note the intricate layering of sensory experience. Taste, sound, smell, sight, and touch all converge, reinforcing the day's events in memory and emotion. For Romans, birthdays were immersive, engaging, and deeply memorable, precisely because every sense was involved. Historians still debate how universally these layered birthday practices were applied. Elite families could host extended celebrations with professional musicians, imported delicacies, and elaborate performances, while more modest households relied on simple foods, homegrown decorations, and improvised games. Yet even in the humblest settings, the core elements remained: ritual, social cohesion, education, and joy. The day's celebrations, whether grand or modest, were designed to strengthen bonds, honor life, and integrate the individual into household and community rhythm. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some families incorporated small acts of divination during post-feast activities, such as tossing dice or drawing lots to predict fortune for the year ahead. These playful, almost gamified rituals combined chance, social interaction, and a subtle acknowledgement of fate's role in daily life. You notice an older cousin quietly performing such a ritual, his focus intense yet playful, a reminder that even structured games could serve symbolic purposes. As the night deepens, the courtyard's energy softens further. Conversation diminishes, replaced by quiet reflection and gentle murmurs. The household shrine, now dimly illuminated, continues to anchor the space spiritually, reminding everyone of the continuity of life and divine attention. Children doze on cushions, adults lean back against benches, and the ambient warmth of human presence, mingled with the glow of lamps and the lingering sense of feast and incense, creates a cocoon of comfort and intimacy. You notice how birthdays in Rome function as layered experiences. Feasting, games, storytelling, music, ritual, and quiet reflection all interwoven. Each layer serves a purpose: nutrition, amusement, education, devotion, socialization, yet together they form a cohesive, immersive, and culturally resonant experience. The richness of sensory detail and the careful structuring of time demonstrate that Romans considered birthdays an essential exercise in balance. Indulgence paired with ritual, play paired with instruction, human joy paired with divine recognition. Finally, you allow yourself to recline fully, breathing deeply, absorbing the gentle energy of the evening. The courtyard is bathed in warm lamplight. Shadows flicker softly across the walls, and the household shrine glows faintly in its corner. Birthdays in Rome, you realize, are exercises in both presence and reflection, seamlessly merging the mundane and sacred, personal and communal. Even as the night winds down, the sense of abundance remains. The memory of flavors, laughter, music, storytelling, and ritual has coalesced into an experience that extends beyond the feast or the formal prayers. For Romans, this was the essence of celebration, a full-bodied immersion that left participants nourished, entertained, educated, and spiritually attended. Tonight, under flickering lamps, the soft murmur of conversation, and the watchful gaze of household spirits, you feel the continuity of life, the bonds of family, and the quiet blessing of the gods. The courtyard has quieted further now, though a low hum of conversation and the occasional clink of a cup reminds you that the household is still alive with subtle motion. The fire has dwindled to glowing embers, its warmth lingering but soft, and the lamps scattered around the space emit a gentle amber glow, casting long shadows that sway lightly with each flicker. You shift on your cushion, sensing that the day is entering its final, most intimate phase: reflection, gift-giving, and personal acknowledgments. This is the Roman birthday's quieter, almost sacred cadence, where attention turns inward even amid the remaining presence of family and friends. You notice the elders quietly organizing small gifts, modest tokens of affection and respect, ready to be presented to each family member in turn. Mainstream historical fact: Romans commonly exchanged gifts on birthdays, ranging from simple items like combs, oil, or jewelry to more elaborate tokens for wealthier households. Gift-giving wasn't just a display of wealth, it was an affirmation of relationships and social bonds. Historians still debate how prescriptive or spontaneous these exchanges were, whether a strict ritual existed or if families simply followed established custom loosely. In either case, gifts formed a critical component of recognition, affection, and social cohesion. Quirky tidbit: some gifts had symbolic or magical significance. For example, a small figurine might be given to invoke protection from household spirits, or a braided bracelet might symbolize friendship and loyalty. You watch a young cousin carefully wrap a tiny token, perhaps a polished shell or a handful of nuts, ensuring it will be a meaningful gesture rather than just an object. Even in the smallest exchange, the weight of intention is palpable. You feel the energy shift as the birthday honoree becomes the center of attention once again. Each gift is accompanied by words, often in the form of a brief toast or poem. Some are humorous, poking gentle fun at past mishaps or quirks. Others are sincere, acknowledging virtue, achievement, or resilience. The combination of humor and solemnity creates a delicate balance, allowing laughter to soften reflection and reverence to deepen shared connection. A mainstream historical fact: birthday toasts in Roman households often included wishes for health, prosperity, and longevity. Some families invoked specific deities or the personal genius of the celebrant, while others preferred playful blessings, reflecting the dual nature of Roman social and religious life. Historians still debate how consistently religious elements were observed. Some evidence suggests elite households emphasized divine acknowledgement, while more modest households focused primarily on social recognition. You notice the subtle choreography of interaction: hands extended for gifts, careful eye contact, and gentle nods of appreciation. Even minor gestures are laden with meaning. A well-timed smile, a bow of the head, or a whispered word reinforces bonds and acknowledges shared presence. Romans understood that the ritual of gift exchange was as much about communication and social literacy as it was about the object itself. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some Romans incorporated playful challenges into gift giving. For instance, a gift might be hidden, requiring the recipient to solve a riddle or perform a small task to claim it. This added a layer of amusement and engagement, reinforcing mental sharpness and communal participation. You watch a cousin pretend to search frantically for a tiny charm hidden behind a vase, eliciting laughter and applause from those nearby. Music continues as a soft backdrop, though it has shifted in tone from lively entertainment to gentle accompaniment. A lyre, a flute, and the faint rattling of small percussion instruments provide a soothing atmosphere that complements gift-giving and reflective conversation. The auditory layer merges seamlessly with the visual flicker of lamplight and the lingering aromas of food and incense, reinforcing the sensory richness of the experience. As each gift is presented, the celebrant responds with gratitude, often verbal, sometimes with gestures. The act of acknowledgement is critical. In Roman households, receiving a gift without proper thanks could be interpreted as disrespectful. This emphasis on reciprocity underscores the broader cultural importance of balance, attentiveness, and social harmony. Historians still debate the degree to which these exchanges were formalized versus spontaneous, but evidence suggests that consistent acknowledgement and polite interaction were culturally expected. The night deepens, and children begin to doze in scattered cushions around the courtyard, their small bodies softened by sleep, yet still attentive to the ambient activity. Adults continue their exchange of gifts and words, though the pace has slowed, reflecting a transition from outward performance to inward reflection. You notice that even subtle movements, a hand brushing a fallen candle wick, a smile directed at a distant cousin, carry meaning, reinforcing both personal connection and household cohesion. A mainstream historical fact: in addition to gifts, some Roman birthdays included small coins or tokens of value for children, a way of acknowledging future potential and fostering a sense of security and inclusion. The act of giving, whether material or symbolic, reinforced the household hierarchy while simultaneously promoting communal harmony. Quirky tidbit: occasionally, gifts might contain humorous punishments or playful challenges, such as a small wooden sword for a child with a mischievous reputation, reminding everyone of past mischief in a light-hearted way. By now, the courtyard has settled into a quiet, rhythmic cadence. Music softens to occasional plucks of a lyre string, conversations taper to murmurs, and the flickering lamplight accentuates the contours of familiar faces, each illuminated in warm glow. The Lararium continues to observe in quiet dignity, ensuring that the household's spiritual foundation remains intact even amid human activity. You realize that Romans understood the importance of structuring celebrations to gradually move from high-energy communal events to softer, more reflective moments. Historians still argue whether the timing and sequence of birthday rituals followed strict guidelines or allowed flexibility. Evidence suggests both patterns coexisted. Some households adhered to prescribed sequences: feast, games, storytelling, gifts, and final prayers, while others adapted activities to the size of the household, the age of participants, and available resources. Regardless, the end goal remained consistent, marking the passage of time with attention, reflection, and celebration. The final moments of the birthday unfold gently. Gifts have been exchanged, toasts made, and laughter gradually replaced by quiet reflection. You lean back on your cushion, absorbing the warm glow of lamps, the faint scent of incense and honey, and the subtle murmur of familial voices. Tonight's celebration, rich in sensory detail, layered ritual, and human connection, has reached a culmination that feels complete yet expansive, encompassing both the individual and the household, the past and the present. You recognize that Roman birthdays, particularly in the intimate moments of reflection and gift exchange, were exercises in attentiveness, social cohesion, and spiritual mindfulness. They weren't merely markers of age. They were opportunities to practice gratitude, reinforce relationships, and honor both household spirits and the threads of family history. The gentle hum of conversation, the soft flicker of lamplight, and the lingering scents all combine to create a space that is immersive, comforting, and memorable. Even as the night winds down, you feel the full weight of Roman celebration. Indulgence balanced with ritual, play combined with reflection, humor interwoven with solemnity. Tonight, in the quiet after the gifts, surrounded by family, music, and the glow of household spirits, you experience the full spectrum of Roman birthday tradition. It is rich, layered, and enduring, an experience that transcends mere festivity to touch memory, connection, and the unseen threads that weave life together. The household is now steeped in quiet reflection, yet the evening is far from over. The last vestiges of the feast linger, the faint scent of honey, roasted meat, and wine still clinging to the walls and the air. The courtyard is dimly lit, torches casting soft flickers that make shadows dance slowly across familiar faces. You stretch out on a cushion, sticky fingers long cleaned, and feel the hum of contentment that comes after a day filled with food, laughter, music, and ritual. Roman birthdays, you realize, aren't merely about indulgence. They're about tying together the threads of community, memory, and divine attention into a cohesive, immersive experience. As the evening deepens, you notice the more intimate practices of the day taking center stage: personal reflection, quiet conversation, and small acts of devotion. The Lararium glows faintly in its corner, the figurines of the Lares and Penates silhouetted against the soft light. Mainstream historical fact: Romans frequently concluded birthday celebrations with final prayers and offerings to household spirits, emphasizing gratitude and a hope for continued protection in the year ahead. Historians still argue whether these concluding rituals were standardized across all households or primarily observed in wealthier settings. But their presence underscores the spiritual continuity embedded in Roman life. A quirky tidbit: some families left small, secret offerings tucked behind figurines or beneath the altar fig scoins, or scraps of honey cake to ensure that even unseen spirits were nourished and pleased. You spot a tiny coin tucked behind a clay lar, a subtle yet intentional gesture demonstrating the Romans' blend of reverence and practicality. Even these small acts carry meaning: acknowledgement, continuity, and attention to the unseen, threading together the material and spiritual world. The quiet of the evening encourages storytelling and reflection. Elders recount anecdotes from past birthdays, family events, or citywide festivals, weaving moral lessons, humor, and subtle social instruction into each tale. Children, now drowsy but attentive, listen with wide eyes, absorbing lessons in patience, attentiveness, and decorum. Mainstream historical fact: oral history played a crucial role in Roman households, transmitting knowledge, moral guidance, and family prestige. Historians still debate the degree of embellishment in these stories, but the cultural function is clear. Birthdays served as a platform for education, social cohesion, and the reinforcement of familial hierarchy. You watch a young cousin recount a humorous anecdote about a runaway amphora, exaggerating his own heroism. Laughter ripples through the group, a mixture of amusement, gentle teasing, and approval. A quirky tidbit. Romans often used exaggeration and humor in storytelling as a subtle form of social training, teaching children to recognize folly, wit, and the consequences of action without harsh punishment. The household itself becomes a stage where lessons, laughter, and subtle instruction are intertwined seamlessly. Music plays softly in the background, a lyre, a flute, and occasional percussion, blending with the rhythm of conversation and soft laughter. You notice how Romans used sound, light, and spatial arrangement to craft immersive experiences. Torches flicker, casting playful shadows. The air is warm with the remnants of the day's fires, and the smell of roasted meat mingles with honey and incense. Every sense is engaged, creating a cohesive, multisensory environment that fosters connection, reflection, and memory. Historians still debate how universally birthdays incorporated storytelling, music, and reflection. Elite households often hosted extended performances, recitations, and music, while more modest homes relied on simpler forms, improvised games, folk songs, or brief anecdotes. Regardless of scale, the underlying goal remained constant: to mark time, reinforce bonds, and engage both the living and the unseen in celebration. Tonight, you experience this layered approach firsthand, recognizing how even small gestures, a shared story, a laugh, a gentle touch can weave an evening into a coherent, memorable whole. The quiet deepens further, and the night encourages introspection. Individuals drift toward the Lararium for private reflection, offering whispered thanks, hopes for health, or small prayers for family members. Some leave additional offerings of food, wine, or oil. Others simply pause, feeling the protective presence of the Lares and Penates. Mainstream historical fact: private devotion complemented communal celebration, emphasizing personal responsibility, gratitude, and spiritual attentiveness. Quirky tidbit: in some households, celebrants whispered secret wishes to their personal genius, believing that even the smallest murmured hope could influence the coming year. A gentle murmur of conversation continues, blending with music and the soft hum of night. Children, finally asleep on cushions, emit faint sighs, and adults lean back, reflecting on the day's events. You notice the unspoken rhythm. Feasting has ended, games are complete, storytelling concludes. Gifts have been exchanged, and now reflection binds all these elements together into a cohesive, spiritual, and emotional experience. Historians still debate the precise sequence or timing of birthday rituals, but the layering of activities, physical, social, and spiritual is consistent across evidence, demonstrating the Romans' sophisticated understanding of human experience and attention. Even subtle household interactions carry significance. A gentle touch on a shoulder, a whispered acknowledgement of service, or a nod toward the Lararium reinforces social cohesion and attentiveness. You realize that Roman birthdays were exercises in mindfulness, not merely indulgence. Attention to detail, observation of rituals, and responsiveness to others were as critical as the feast itself. The night stretches further, and you feel enveloped by a sense of continuity, connection, and shared history. The household shrine glows faintly. The flicker of torches illuminates familiar faces, and the lingering aromas of food, honey, and incense anchor you to the moment. Even the soft whispers of family members carry meaning, reinforcing bonds and reminding everyone of their place within the household, community, and cosmos. Finally, the courtyard settles into near silence. Music ceases, conversations taper to quiet murmurs, and only the embers of the fire and the faint glow of lamps remain. You sit back, absorbing the culmination of the day: feasting, games, storytelling, music, gifts, and reflection, all interwoven into a coherent, layered experience. Roman birthdays, you realize, are as much about memory, attention, and spiritual awareness as they are about indulgence or celebration. In this quiet, immersive moment, you understand the holistic nature of Roman birthdays. They engage body, mind, and spirit. They weave together the human and divine. They blend indulgence, social instruction, and personal reflection. Tonight, under the soft glow of lamps, the protective gaze of household spirits, and the gentle rhythm of sleeping children and relaxed adults, you feel the full spectrum of Roman tradition and communal life. Every scent, sound, and gesture contributes to a lasting memory, leaving you both content and subtly enlightened about the delicate art of celebration in ancient Rome. Night has deepened, and the courtyard now hums with the softer, slower rhythm of winding down celebrations. The feast is long finished, the last crumbs of honey cake swept away, and the glow from the lamps and torches creates a calm, amber haze over familiar faces. You sit on a cushion, letting the warmth of the evening seep into your body, aware that Roman birthdays have an almost meditative quality, as they transition from energetic play and social performances to reflection, gratitude, and quiet bonding. Even as the overt festivities fade, ritual and attention to the divine remain central. The Lararium, illuminated faintly by a lone oil lamp, draws your gaze. The small figurines of the Lares and Penates appear almost animated in the flickering light, a quiet reminder that the household's spiritual life is intertwined with every human action. Mainstream historical fact: Romans concluded birthday celebrations with offerings and prayers to household spirits, seeking protection, prosperity, and continued health. Scholars still debate whether these concluding rituals followed strict forms or allowed for personal improvisation, but their purpose to reinforce household and spiritual continuities universally acknowledged. A quirky tidbit: some families added small secret offerings to the altar after guests had gone to sleep, crumbs, coins, or drops of honey, as a personal way of ensuring that invisible guardians remained content and vigilant. You notice a tiny fragment of bread tucked behind a figurine, a small, intimate gesture reminding you that attention to the unseen was as important as attending to the visible feast. Even these minor acts create layers of meaning in the household experience, blending material and spiritual care seamlessly. The quieter phase of the birthday also invites storytelling and personal reminiscence. Elders recount tales of family exploits, citywide festivals, and heroic or humorous incidents from past birthdays. Children, still lingering on cushions, absorb lessons interwoven with humor, exaggeration, and subtle moral instruction. Mainstream historical fact: oral storytelling in Roman households preserved cultural memory, reinforced social norms, and taught virtues through example. Historians still argue about the line between fact and embellishment in these stories, but their social and educational function is undeniable. You notice the interplay of humor and solemnity as tales are told. A cousin exaggerates an incident with a runaway amphora, causing laughter and playful commentary. Yet the story also subtly conveys lessons about attentiveness, family cohesion, and the consequences of carelessness. Quirky tidbit: some storytellers incorporated supernatural elements, suggesting that a mischievous Lar intervened in the tale. Such embellishments kept listeners engaged, connected the human with the divine, and reinforced the omnipresent role of household spirits in daily life. Music continues in the background, though more subdued than earlier in the day. A soft lyre accompanies the murmur of conversation, the occasional clap of hands punctuating an amusing or dramatic moment. The interplay of sound, light, and movement creates a rich sensory environment, ensuring that even as the energy dips, participants remain engaged in a carefully crafted flow of attention and memory. Romans clearly understood that celebration is as much about environment and sensory orchestration as it is about overt action. Historians still debate the universality of these sensory layers in birthday rituals. Elite households could afford professional musicians, dancers, and elaborate performances, while modest homes adapted the principles using homemade instruments, improvised games, and simple storytelling. Regardless of scale, the goal was consistent: to engage participants fully, reinforcing social bonds, cultural continuity, and spiritual mindfulness. As the evening deepens further, quieter acts of attention and reflection take center stage. You notice adults quietly offering small gifts, tokens of respect, or coins to younger family members. Mainstream historical fact: birthday gifts in Roman culture ranged from practical objects like combs and oil to symbolic tokens, sometimes imbued with magical or spiritual significance. Scholars still debate how ritualized these exchanges were, but their social importance is undeniable. A quirky tidbit: some gifts were hidden or accompanied by playful challenges, requiring the recipient to perform a small task, answer a riddle, or act out a scene to claim it. These playful elements reinforced attentiveness, wit, and engagement while weaving humor into the ceremonial act of giving. You watch a young cousin hunt for a hidden token behind a lamp, laughter rippling through the courtyard, blending playfulness with tradition. Attention to household spirits continues alongside these social exchanges. The Lares and Penates remain quietly observed, small lamps illuminating their forms. Additional offerings are made: drops of wine, small scraps of food, or coins acknowledging divine guardianship while reinforcing the connection between human action and spiritual favor. Historians still argue about the consistency of these practices, but evidence shows they were a deeply rooted feature of Roman domestic ritual. By now, most children have succumbed to sleep, leaning against benches or curled in cushions, while adults relax into gentle conversation or reflective silence. The courtyard is filled with subtle motion: a hand reaching for a lamp, the soft scrape of a cushion being adjusted, the gentle inhalation of incense smoke. The day's events, feasting, games, music, storytelling, gift-giving, and devotion have woven into a seamless experience of celebration, reflection, and social cohesion. Finally, the night reaches its quietest point. Conversations fade, music ceases, and only the faint glow of the altar lamps and torches remains. You recline fully, absorbing the layered experiences of the day: the laughter, the lessons, the subtle rituals, and the communal rhythms that define Roman birthdays. You sense how deeply these celebrations blend personal joy with communal engagement, spiritual mindfulness, and sensory awareness, leaving participants nourished, attentive, and connected. Even in the quiet, you recognize the Roman sophisticated orchestration of celebration. They combined indulgence with reflection, performance with instruction, and human interaction with divine acknowledgement. Birthdays weren't just markers of age, they were holistic experiences, teaching attentiveness, social awareness, and gratitude. Under the soft lamplight, the watchful eyes of household spirits, and the gentle rhythm of a sleeping household, you feel the full depth of Roman tradition. Each laugh, story, gift, and offering contributes to a rich tapestry of human and spiritual connection, leaving a lasting impression of continuity, belonging, and celebration. The courtyard is now bathed in the deep calm of late night. Torches have burned low, their flames flickering lazily, casting soft, quivering shadows across walls decorated with garlands and remnants of earlier activity. The air carries the lingering scents of honey, roasted meat, wine, and faint traces of incense. You stretch back on a cushion, listening to the quiet murmurs of conversation and the gentle breathing of children now fast asleep. Even in stillness, the household pulses with subtle energy, a testament to the Romans' sophisticated understanding of how celebrations, even birthdays, engage mind, body, and spirit. At this stage, reflection is the central activity. Adults lean back, occasionally exchanging gentle words, smiles, or nods, while a few return to the lararium, offering quiet prayers or additional small tokens to household spirits. Mainstream historical fact. Concluding birthday rituals often involved private devotion to the Lares and Penates, affirming gratitude, protection, and the hope of prosperity for the coming year. Historians still debate how formalized these concluding ceremonies were, or whether they varied widely between elite and modest households. But their presence illustrates the seamless integration of spiritual mindfulness into daily and celebratory life. A quirky tidbit. Some Romans whispered secret wishes to their personal genius, believing that even the faintest murmur could influence luck or fortune over the next year. You notice a cousin carefully tipping a small vial of wine toward the altar, murmuring a private hope for health, a subtle act of ritual precision that seems both intimate and deeply human. The layering of communal celebration and private devotion demonstrates the Roman skill at creating holistic experiences that satisfy both social and spiritual needs. Soft music plays intermittently, gentle strains of a lyre or soft percussion threading through the quiet. Conversation has become contemplative, punctuated by laughter that's quieter, more intimate, often tied to recollections of amusing or meaningful moments from earlier in the day. Storytelling, too, has shifted from performative bursts to reflective recitations, allowing participants to savor the rhythm of memory, humor, and insight. Mainstream historical fact. Storytelling in Roman domestic life served multiple functions. From education to moral instruction to entertainment, particularly during significant celebrations like birthdays. Historians still argue about how much embellishment was typical, but the combination of memory, humor, and lesson was clearly valued. You notice the subtle choreography of attention and care, a hand lightly brushing a stray candle wick, a nod to acknowledge a quietly offered gift, a whispered comment acknowledging another's contribution to the festivities. Even seemingly mundane acts are imbued with significance. Romans understood that attention to detail, observation of social nuance, and responsiveness to others were integral parts of celebration, teaching lessons in empathy and mindfulness alongside entertainment. Quirky tidbit. Some households incorporated playful rituals alongside serious reflection, such as tossing small tokens or coins to predict the celebrant's fortune or determine minor household duties for the coming year. These seemingly whimsical acts reinforced engagement, attention, and the blending of chance with ritual, creating a dynamic, layered experience. You watch a cousin toss a small coin onto a cushion, eliciting quiet laughter and nods from nearby adults, blending humor, superstition, and connection. Even in the final moments of the night, the sensory layering continues. The flickering lamps illuminate familiar faces with a soft glow. The faint scent of roasted honey mingles with incense. The gentle hum of breathing, whispers, and occasional soft laughter forms an ambient soundtrack. Mainstream historical fact. Roman celebrations, particularly birthdays, were meticulously designed to engage multiple senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and sound to reinforce memory, enjoyment, and social cohesion. Historians still debate whether this multisensory approach was a conscious cultural strategy or an evolved practice, but its effectiveness is clear. By now, most participants are reclining, drowsy from indulgence, movement, and the gentle excitement of the day. Children lie tucked into cushions or small beds, while adults remain in low conversation, reflecting on events, exchanging final words of affection, or quietly tending to ritual objects. You notice the rhythm of the household: activity, reflection, and attentiveness moving in seamless cycles that leave a lingering sense of fullness, satisfaction, and spiritual awareness. A quirky tidbit. In some households, a final, light-hearted competition or game might occur after the main activities, intended to end the celebration on a note of playful energy, reinforcing both social bonds and memory. Perhaps a whispered riddle contest, or a quiet race to retrieve small objects, blending amusement with subtle ritual. You witness a small cousin racing to grab a coin hidden under a cushion. Laughter soft and affectionate, marking the end of structured festivities with gentle, joyful motion. As the night winds to a close, attention naturally returns to the spiritual. You watch as small final offerings of wine, bread, or nuts are placed before the household spirits. The Lares and Penates remain quiet observers, their figurines catching the soft glow of lamplight. Their presence reinforcing continuity, protection, and the subtle bond between mortal and divine. Historians still debate whether such concluding rituals were more performative or sincerely devotional, but in practice, they encompass both, blending acknowledgement, gratitude, and attentiveness into a final cohesive act. Finally, the household settles into a deep, encompassing calm. Children are fully asleep, adults recline in gentle repose, and the courtyard glows with soft lamplight and the faint ember of spent torches. You feel a sense of completion. The feast, games, storytelling, music, gift-giving, reflection, and devotion have coalesced into a layered, immersive experience. Roman birthdays, you realize, are far more than a marker of age. They are exercises in social literacy, attentiveness, spiritual awareness, and communal cohesion. See teaching participants how to live thoughtfully while celebrating joyfully. Even as silence spreads, the subtle energy of the evening persists in memory and spirit. Every gesture, story, and offering contributes to a tapestry of experience, indulgence tempered with ritual, humor mingled with reflection, human interaction interwoven with divine attention. Tonight, under the flickering lamps, the watchful eyes of household spirits, and the gentle cadence of a contented household, you feel the full depth of Roman tradition. A celebration designed to nourish mind, body, and spirit simultaneously. The household is now fully at rest, the courtyard steeped in soft shadow and gentle warmth. The last flicker of torchlight fades, leaving only the faint glow of the lararium to mark the presence of unseen guardians. You lie back on a cushion, muscles relaxed, breathing slow and even, and allow the sensations of the evening to settle within you. The rich aromas of honey, wine, and incense linger faintly, blending with the cool night air, and you feel the comforting weight of tradition, memory, and family surrounding you. You reflect on the day's celebrations, the feast that satisfied body and appetite, the games that sharpened wit and coordination, the storytelling that preserved history and transmitted lessons, the music that bound everyone in rhythm and shared emotion, and the quiet rituals that reinforced spiritual mindfulness. Each layer of the birthday has been carefully orchestrated, a choreography of sound, sight, taste, and touch, yet experienced so naturally that it feels effortless. You realize how deeply Romans understood the art of creating immersive, holistic experiences that honor both human joy and divine attention. The courtyard is quiet now, punctuated only by the gentle breaths of sleeping children and the soft murmur of those lingering in thought. You let your mind drift along with the fading warmth, tracing the laughter, the playful teasing, the gentle nods of acknowledgement, and the whispered prayers. Even in sleep, the memory of the day's rhythms carries forward, weaving a sense of connection, continuity, and calm. As you settle fully into this quiet, the world of flickering lights, sweet aromas, soft music, and attentive care begins to dissolve gently into memory. Roman birthdays, with their rich layers of ritual, reflection, and delight, leave a lingering sense of contentment that extends beyond the celebration itself. You close your eyes, letting the night cradle you, carrying the rhythms, laughter, and quiet wisdom of centuries past into your dreams. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself drift, breathing in the serenity of the moment, the lingering warmth of connection, and the gentle watchfulness of invisible guardians. Tonight, the memory of Roman celebration guides you into rest, and for a few hours, the world feels full, safe, and profoundly alive.